After my husband Garrett abandoned me and our 3 kids to run off with his secretary, I was left scrambling to sell his precious woodworking workshop just to keep the lights on. But when I broke into his locked back room, I discovered a hidden fortune in handcrafted masterpieces worth millions, plus evidence of art forgery that would send him to prison while making me richer than I'd ever dreamed. What he didn't know was that my late grandmother had taught me everything about antique appraisal, and by the time he realized what treasures he'd left behind, I was living in a mansion while he faced federal fraud charges. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe. Because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows of our modest 2-story home in Willowbrook Heights, casting long shadows across the breakfast table, where I sat with 3 sets of concerned eyes watching me. My children, 12-year-old Hazel, 10-year-old River, and 8-year-old Phoenix, had stopped asking when Daddy was coming home. It had been 6 weeks since Garrett Thorne, my husband of 15 years, had packed his bags and walked out of our lives without so much as a backward glance. "Mom, are we really going to lose the house?" Hazel asked, her voice small and worried as she stirred her cereal without eating it. The foreclosure notice on the counter seemed to mock us all, a stark reminder of the financial devastation Garrett had left in his wake. I forced a smile, the same one I'd been wearing like armor for weeks. "Not if I can help it, sweetheart. That's why Mommy's going to sell Daddy's workshop today." The workshop. Garrett's pride and joy, his sanctuary where he'd spent countless hours crafting what he called custom furniture for his exclusive clientele. The 40 by 60-foot building behind our house had been off-limits to all of us for years. "Creative space needs boundaries," he'd always said, installing not 1 but 3 different locks on the main door and keeping the keys on a chain around his neck like some kind of medieval guard. Now those keys sat heavy in my palm, recovered from his abandoned dresser drawer along with a note that had shattered what remained of my heart. "Vivian, I found my true calling with Delphine. The workshop and its contents should cover the mortgage for a few months. Don't try to find me." Delphine Carver, his 26-year-old secretary at Thorne & Associates Architecture, had been everything I apparently wasn't: young, childless, and willing to laugh at his jokes about his boring family obligations. The irony wasn't lost on me that an architect specializing in custom homes had walked away from the one he'd built with me. As I walked the children to the school bus stop, my neighbor, elderly Mrs. Pemberton, waved from her garden. "Any word from Garrett, dear?" she called out, her voice dripping with the kind of false sympathy that made my teeth ache. "He's pursuing new opportunities," I replied, the lie bitter on my tongue. Let the neighborhood gossips make of that what they would. After the bus pulled away, I stood in front of the workshop for the first time since Garrett's departure. The building loomed larger than I remembered, its cedar siding weathered gray, and windows tinted so dark they revealed nothing of the interior. A hand-painted sign above the door read, "Thorne Custom Woodworking, established 2015, in elegant script that Garrett had commissioned from a local artist. The first key turned easily in the main lock, but my heart hammered as I approached the entrance. What exactly had my husband been creating in here all these years? I knew he made custom furniture, dining tables, armoires, bookcases, for wealthy clients throughout Millbrook County. The work paid well, supplementing his architectural income enough to afford our comfortable lifestyle. Or so I'd thought before the bills started arriving, and I discovered our savings account held exactly $247. The workshop's main area was exactly what I'd expected. A woodworker's paradise filled with professional-grade tools, lumber stacks organized by wood type, and several pieces in various stages of completion. A gorgeous cherry dining table dominated the center space, its surface smooth as silk under my fingertips. Along the walls, I spotted a mahogany bookcase that belonged in a mansion and an oak armoire that had to be worth thousands. This was promising. Even a conservative estimate put the visible pieces at maybe $50,000, enough to catch up on the mortgage and buy some breathing room while I figured out our next steps. But it was the second door, hidden behind a partition wall and secured with 2 additional locks, that made my pulse quicken. Garrett had never mentioned a back room. In all our years of marriage, through all his enthusiastic descriptions of his latest projects, he'd never once referenced this separate space. The remaining keys felt warm in my palm as I approached the mysterious door. The second lock opened with a soft click, but the third key stuck, fighting me as if the room beyond didn't want to surrender its secrets. Finally, with a grinding protest, the mechanism gave way. I pushed open the door and stepped into darkness, my hand fumbling along the wall until I found a light switch. What I saw when the fluorescent bulbs flickered to life made me gasp and stumble backward. The hidden room was 3 times larger than the main workshop, and it was filled with the most exquisite pieces of furniture I'd ever seen. Not just furniture, art. Museum-quality pieces that belonged in the homes of millionaires or the galleries of New York City. An intricate Chinese screen that had to be centuries old. A writing desk that looked suspiciously like something from the court of Louis XVI. A collection of oil paintings in ornate frames lining the walls. But it was the workstation in the corner that made my blood run cold. Bottles of aging solution, staining compounds, and what appeared to be documentation tools. Photographs of famous pieces alongside Garrett's obvious reproductions. Reference books on antique authentication. And most damning of all, a notebook filled with client names, dates, and prices that made my head spin. One entry jumped out at me. Rothschild secretary desk, 1847 original sold to Henderson for $450,000. Reproduction completed for Morrison collection, $380,000. Client believes authentic. My husband hadn't been making custom furniture. He'd been running a sophisticated art forgery operation, creating reproductions so perfect they fooled wealthy collectors into paying hundreds of thousands for fakes. And he'd walked away from millions of dollars worth of stolen art and forgeries, thinking he was leaving behind worthless wood scraps. What Garrett didn't know, what he'd never bothered to learn despite 15 years of marriage, was that my late grandmother, Esther Blackwell, had been one of the most respected antique appraisers on the East Coast. I'd spent every summer of my childhood learning to spot authentic pieces, understanding the subtle details that separated genuine antiques from clever fakes. She'd taught me to read wood grain like a book, to identify period-specific construction techniques, to spot the tiny imperfections that proved authenticity. Standing in that hidden room, surrounded by millions in stolen art and perfect forgeries, I realized that my cheating, abandoning husband had just handed me the keys to a fortune he didn't even know he possessed. More than that, he'd given me the evidence I needed to ensure he'd never be able to hurt our family again. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. Alright, let's get back to it. I stood frozen in the hidden room for what felt like hours, my mind struggling to process the magnitude of what I was seeing. The notebook in my trembling hands contained 3 years' worth of transactions, each entry more staggering than the last. Garrett hadn't just been cheating on our marriage, he'd been cheating some of the wealthiest collectors in the country. My phone buzzed against my hip, jolting me back to reality. A text from our mortgage company. Final notice. Payment due in 72 hours or foreclosure proceedings begin. The irony was almost laughable. Here I stood surrounded by millions of dollars in art and antiques, while my children's home hung in the balance. But as I flipped through more pages of Garrett's meticulous records, the initial shock gave way to something far more disturbing. These weren't just forgeries. Many of the pieces were stolen originals. The Chinese screen I'd admired bore a small brass plaque reading, "On loan from the Westmont Museum of Fine Arts." The Louis XVI writing desk had documentation, showing it had been missing from a private estate sale in Newport 3 months ago. Page after page revealed a systematic theft operation disguised as a high-end woodworking business. I sank into Garrett's leather chair, the weight of discovery crushing down on me. My husband wasn't just a cheating bastard who'd abandoned his family. He was a criminal who'd been using our home as a base for art theft and forgery operations. For years, while I'd been packing his lunches and kissing him goodbye, he'd been building a criminal empire right under our noses. The workshop's main door slammed shut with a bang that echoed through both rooms. My heart hammered as I heard footsteps across the wooden floor. "Vivian, you in here!" The voice made my blood freeze. Garrett. I quickly shoved the notebook into my jacket and switched off the hidden room's lights, pulling the door shut as quietly as possible. But there was no way to lock it from the inside, and no other exit. I was trapped. "I know you're here, Viv. Your car's in the driveway." His voice was closer now, right outside the main workshop. "We need to talk." I forced myself to walk calmly into the main area, hoping my face didn't betray what I'd just discovered. Garrett stood silhouetted in the doorway, but something was different about him. Gone was the confident architect who'd walked out of our lives 6 weeks ago. This man looked haggard, desperate, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy that set my teeth on edge. "Garrett." I kept my voice level, though my heart was racing. "What are you doing here?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. "I came to get some tools I left behind. Delphine and I are starting fresh in Costa Rica, and I'll need to set up a new workshop." Costa Rica. That explained why he'd been so confident about disappearing without a trace. No extradition treaties for financial crimes. "How convenient," I said, crossing my arms. "Meanwhile, your children are about to lose their home because you cleaned out our accounts before you left." His face hardened. "The accounts were in my name. I earned that money. With your legitimate architecture practice, or with whatever you've really been doing in here," the words slipped out before I could stop them. Something shifted in Garrett's expression, a flash of panic quickly masked by calculated calm. "I don't know what you're implying, but this is a woodworking shop. I make custom furniture for rich clients who pay premium prices. Nothing more complicated than that." He was lying smoothly, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept darting toward the hidden room's concealed door. He was here for something specific, and it wasn't tools. "Really? Because I was just admiring some of your work. That cherry dining table is magnificent." I gestured toward the piece in the center of the room. "Must be worth quite a bit." 20,000, he said quickly. "Already sold to a client in Richmond. They're picking it up next week." Another lie. I'd seen no such transaction in his notebook. Garrett moved deeper into the workshop, his movements casual but purposeful. He was working his way toward the hidden room, trying to look like he was just browsing his old workspace. But I caught the moment when his hand slipped into his pocket and emerged with a different set of keys, ones I'd never seen before. "Actually, Vivian, I'm glad you're here. Saves me a trip to the house." He turned to face me fully, and something in his smile made my skin crawl. "There are some things in here that belong to clients. Pieces they've paid for, but haven't collected yet. I need to arrange their return." "How thoughtful of you," I said, backing toward the main door. Every instinct was screaming at me to get out of there. "I'll leave you to it." "Wait." His voice stopped me cold. "Actually, there's something we should discuss. About the kids." I turned back to him, my maternal instincts overriding my fear. "What about them?" "Delphine's pregnant." The words hit like a physical blow. "We're starting a real family, Viv. A planned family, not like—" He gestured vaguely toward the house. "Not like what we had." The casual cruelty of it, dismissing our 15 years, our 3 children, as if they'd been some kind of mistake, left me momentarily speechless. "I know this is hard," he continued, his tone taking on the patronizing edge I'd grown to hate, "but you need to face reality. I'm never coming back. You need to sell this place, downsize, maybe move back in with your parents. The kids will adjust." "You're telling me to uproot our children's entire lives because you decided to start over with your mistress?" "I'm telling you to be practical." His mask was slipping now, revealing the cold calculation underneath. You can't afford this house on your own. You have no real job skills. You've been dependent on me for 15 years. The dismissal stung because part of it was true. I'd put my career on hold to raise our children, supporting Garrett's ambitions while my own dreams gathered dust. But as I stood there, feeling the weight of his stolen notebook in my jacket pocket, I realized something had fundamentally changed in the past hour. I wasn't the same helpless woman he'd left behind 6 weeks ago. "You're right," I said quietly. "I have been dependent on you, but that's about to change." Something in my tone made him pause. For the first time since he'd arrived, Garrett looked uncertain. "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled, feeling a surge of confidence I hadn't experienced in years. "It means you're not the only one with secrets, Garrett. And you just made a very big mistake coming back here." His face went pale. "Vivian, what are you talking about?" But I was already walking toward the door, my hand on the handle. "Enjoy your visit to the workshop. Take all the time you need to collect your things." As I stepped outside into the bright afternoon sun, I heard him call my name, but I didn't look back. I had phone calls to make, and suddenly I knew exactly who to call first. The game had changed, and Garrett had no idea he was no longer playing against the naive wife he'd left behind. My hands shook as I unlocked the back door to our house, the weight of Garrett's criminal notebook burning against my ribs where I'd hidden it inside my jacket. Through the kitchen window, I could see him still moving around the workshop, probably accessing his hidden room now that he thought I was safely out of the way. The arrogance of the man, returning to collect evidence while assuming I'd remain the obedient, clueless wife. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen, paralyzed by the magnitude of what I'd discovered. Who exactly do you call when you find out your husband is an international art thief? The local police seemed laughably inadequate for something this complex. The FBI felt too intimidating, too official for someone like me who'd never even gotten a speeding ticket. Then I remembered my grandmother's stories about authentication disputes, about the network of experts who helped track down stolen pieces and expose forgeries. Grandmother Esther had always spoken fondly of her colleague, Dr. Helena Ashford, who worked with insurance companies and law enforcement to recover stolen art. If she was still alive, still working. A quick internet search revealed that Dr. Ashford, now in her 70s, ran a private consulting firm specializing in art recovery and authentication. Her website showed a distinguished woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, surrounded by testimonials from museums and private collectors. More importantly, her bio mentioned 30 years of collaboration with federal investigators. I dialed her number before I could lose my nerve. "Ashford Art Recovery? This is Helena speaking." The voice was crisp, professional, with just a hint of warmth. "Dr. Ashford, my name is Vivian Thorne. I believe you knew my grandmother, Esther Blackwell?" There was a pause, then genuine pleasure crept into her voice. "Esther's granddaughter! My goodness, I haven't heard that name in years. How is dear Esther?" "She passed away 5 years ago," I said softly. "But she taught me everything she knew about antique identification. Dr. Ashford, I need your help with something very serious." "What kind of help, dear?" I took a deep breath. "I've discovered what appears to be a major art theft and forgery operation, and I don't know who to trust with this information." The warmth vanished from her voice, replaced by laser focus. "Are you in immediate danger?" "I don't think so, but the person responsible just returned unexpectedly, and I'm not sure what he's planning." "Where are you now?" "At home. The stolen pieces are in a building on my property." Listen to me very carefully, Vivian. Do not confront this person alone. Do not let them know you've discovered anything. Can you safely photograph the pieces and any documentation you found? My heart hammered as I looked toward the workshop. He's in there now, but yes, I think I can manage it when he leaves. Good. Send everything to my secure email address. I'll give you the details. I have contacts at the FBI's art crime team who specialize in exactly this type of case. But first, I need you to tell me what you've seen." For the next 20 minutes, I described everything. The hidden room, the stolen museum pieces, Garrett's meticulous records, his plan to flee to Costa Rica. Dr. Ashford asked precise questions, clearly taking detailed notes. "Vivian, what you've described sounds like a sophisticated criminal enterprise. The fact that he's planning to leave the country suggests he may already be under investigation, or at least suspects he's been discovered by someone else." A chill ran down my spine. Someone else? Art theft rings rarely operate in isolation. If your husband has been selling stolen pieces, there are buyers, middlemen, possibly other thieves involved. Some of these people are extremely dangerous when their operations are threatened. Through the window, I saw Garrett emerge from the workshop carrying a large duffel bag. He loaded it into his car, not the BMW he'd driven when he lived here, but a nondescript gray sedan I didn't recognize. Everything about his body language screamed urgency. "Dr. Ashford, he's leaving now, with a bag that definitely wasn't here when I found the room." That's concerning. He may be clearing out the most valuable or incriminating pieces. How quickly can you get back in there safely? I watched Garrett's car disappear down our street. Now I think he didn't see my car hidden behind the garage. Be very careful and photograph everything, even empty spaces where pieces might have been removed. I'm going to make some calls while you work. Check your email in 2 hours. I'll have instructions and contact information for the federal agents who need to see this. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen for a moment, trying to process how dramatically my life had changed in a single afternoon. This morning I'd been a desperate single mother facing foreclosure. Now I was apparently a key witness in a federal art theft investigation. The workshop felt different when I returned, charged with an energy that made my skin prickle. Garrett had indeed taken several pieces from the hidden room. I could see empty spaces where the Chinese screen and 2 of the smaller paintings had been. But plenty remained, including the most damning evidence: his records, his forgery tools, and several pieces I now recognized from news articles about museum thefts. I spent the next hour methodically photographing everything from multiple angles, documenting each piece alongside Garrett's notes about its origin and sale price. The scope of his operation was staggering. Conservative estimates put the value of remaining items at over $8 million. But it was the loose papers scattered on his workbench that made my blood run cold. Shipping manifests for Costa Rica, dated for next week. A property deed for a compound outside San Jose. And most terrifying of all, insurance documents for our house listing both Garrett and me as beneficiaries on a policy I'd never seen before. $1 million life insurance policy, taken out just 6 months ago. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stay away from the workshop until I return. Some very dangerous people are looking for those pieces, and they won't care that you're innocent. This is for your protection and the kids. Don't make me regret trying to keep you safe, G." The patronizing tone couldn't hide the threat underneath. Garrett wasn't just a thief. He was involved with people dangerous enough to make him genuinely afraid, and somehow I'd stumbled into the middle of it. I quickly finished photographing the remaining evidence and locked up the workshop, my hands trembling as I secured each lock. Back in the house, I sent everything to Dr. Ashford's email address, along with photos of Garrett's threatening text. Her response came within minutes. "Federal agents will contact you within the hour. Pack essentials for you and the children. You may need to relocate temporarily for your safety. This is bigger than we initially thought." As I climbed the stairs to pack bags for my children, I realized that discovering Garrett's crimes had solved one problem, our financial crisis, while creating a much more dangerous one. The workshop full of stolen art could indeed save our home, but it might also get us killed. The afternoon sun was setting through Hazel's bedroom window as I folded her clothes into a suitcase, and I wondered if we'd ever sleep in this house again. The black SUV pulled into my driveway exactly 1 hour after Dr. Ashford's email, just as my children were getting off the school bus. I watched from the kitchen window as two people in dark suits emerged. A tall woman with auburn hair pulled back severely and a shorter man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. They looked exactly like what I'd expected FBI agents to look like, which was somehow both reassuring and terrifying. "Mom, who are those people?" Hazel asked, dropping her backpack by the door as she peered out the window. "Some people who need to talk to Mommy about Daddy's work," I said, hoping my voice sounded calmer than I felt. "Why don't you three go upstairs and start on homework? I'll bring snacks up in a few minutes." The doorbell rang before I could prepare myself further. Through the peephole, the woman held up an official-looking badge. "Mrs. Thorne? I'm Special Agent Carmen Rodriguez, FBI Art Crime Team. This is Agent Michael Chen. Dr. Ashford said you have information about stolen artwork." I opened the door, noting how Agent Rodriguez's sharp eyes immediately scanned the interior of our home while Agent Chen smiled warmly, clearly designated as the friendly face of their partnership. "Please come in. The children are upstairs doing homework." We settled in the living room, and I was struck by how surreal it felt to be discussing federal crimes in the same space where we'd had countless family movie nights. Agent Chen pulled out a tablet while Agent Rodriguez opened a leather portfolio. "Mrs. Thorne," Agent Rodriguez began, her voice professional but not unkind, "Dr. Ashford shared the photographs you sent. What you've documented appears to be connected to several ongoing investigations. We need to understand the full scope of what your husband has been doing." "How long has he been operating this business?" Agent Chen asked, his tone gentler. "I honestly don't know. I discovered the hidden room for the first time today." The admission made me feel naive, but both agents nodded without judgment. "That's actually not uncommon," Agent Rodriguez said. "Successful art thieves often maintain completely separate lives. Their families rarely know anything about their criminal activities." Agent Chen showed me his tablet screen, which displayed a series of photographs. "Can you identify any of these pieces from what you saw today?" My heart sank as I recognized several items immediately. That Monet sketch, it was hanging in the back corner of the hidden room, and that bronze sculpture, it was on the shelf near his workstation. The Monet was reported stolen from a private collector in Boston 8 months ago, Agent Rodriguez said grimly. The bronze disappeared from a gallery in Philadelphia last year. "Mrs. Thorne, your husband isn't just creating forgeries. He's part of a theft ring that's been operating across multiple states." Agent Chen leaned forward. "The good news is that your cooperation could help us recover millions of dollars in stolen art and shut down this entire operation. The challenging news is that these organizations don't typically allow people to just walk away." "What does that mean for my family?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. "It means you and your children may be in danger," Agent Rodriguez said bluntly. "Art theft at this level involves serious criminals. When operations start unraveling, they sometimes eliminate loose ends." As if summoned by my worst fears, my phone buzzed with another text from Garrett. "I hope you haven't done anything stupid, Viv. The people I work with don't forgive mistakes, and they consider family members part of the business. Keep quiet and keep safe." I showed the message to both agents, watching their expressions harden. "We need to move quickly," Agent Rodriguez said, pulling out her own phone. "I'm calling for a protection detail. Mrs. Thorne, how soon can you and the children be ready to leave?" "Leave? For how long?" "That depends on how cooperative your husband decides to be and how quickly we can roll up his associates," Agent Chen explained. "Could be days, could be weeks." The reality hit me like a physical blow. Not only had Garrett destroyed our marriage and abandoned his children, but his crimes were now forcing us from our home entirely. The injustice of it made my hands clench into fists. "There's something else," I said, remembering the insurance documents I'd photographed. "I found a life insurance policy on me that I never signed. $1 million, taken out 6 months ago." Both agents exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. "Mrs. Thorne," Agent Rodriguez said carefully, "we need to see that documentation immediately. and we need to accelerate our timeline significantly. As Agent Chen called for additional backup, I heard footsteps on the stairs. River appeared in the doorway, his young face scrunched with worry. "Mom, are we in trouble? I heard you talking about leaving." Before I could answer, Agent Rodriguez's phone rang. She answered tersely, walking toward the window as she spoke in low, urgent tones. When she returned, her expression was grim. "Mrs. Thorne, we need to move now. Our surveillance team just spotted 2 unknown vehicles conducting reconnaissance of your neighborhood. They're not law enforcement." The calm professionalism I'd been maintaining shattered. "You mean they're here, watching my house?" "It appears so. Agent Chen is coordinating immediate extraction. Can you get your children and essentials packed in under 10 minutes? I nodded, running toward the stairs on shaking legs. In the hallway above, all 3 of my children stood clustered together, having obviously heard more than I'd intended. "Are we going on a trip?" Phoenix asked, his 8-year-old mind trying to process the tension he could feel but not understand. "A short one, baby," I said, pulling him into a hug while motioning for Hazel and River to follow me to their rooms. "Remember those suitcases I packed earlier? We're gonna need them now." Hazel, always too perceptive for her own good, grabbed my arm. "Mom, this is about Dad, isn't it? About why he really left?" Looking into my 12-year-old daughter's eyes, I realized I couldn't protect her from the truth much longer. But I could protect her from the immediate danger. "Yes, sweetheart, but right now the most important thing is keeping our family safe. Can you help me get your brothers ready?" As we threw final items into bags, I heard Agent Rodriguez coordinating with what sounded like multiple law enforcement units. Through River's bedroom window, I caught a glimpse of a dark sedan parked across the street that definitely hadn't been there when the school bus arrived. 10 minutes later, we were loading into an unmarked van driven by a third agent, leaving behind the only home my children had ever known. As we pulled out of our driveway, I saw Agent Rodriguez speaking into her radio while pointing toward the workshop. "Where are we going?" Hazel asked from beside me, her voice small and scared. "Somewhere safe," I promised, though I had no idea where that might be or when we'd be able to come home. Looking back at our house as we drove away, I realized that Garrett's betrayal had cost us far more than our marriage and financial security. It had cost us our entire life. But as I held my children close in the back of that government van, I also felt something unexpected stirring beneath the fear. Determination. Garrett thought he could use us as leverage, threaten us to keep us quiet. He was about to learn that the woman he'd underestimated for 15 years was done being a victim. The safe house turned out to be a nondescript ranch home in a suburban development 40 minutes from Willowbrook Heights, the kind of place that screamed witness protection, with its beige siding and carefully maintained anonymity. Agent Chen had assured us it was temporary, but as I tucked my children into unfamiliar beds that first night, I wondered what temporary meant when your husband was connected to international art thieves. The next morning brought a revelation that changed everything. I was sitting at the kitchen table nursing my 3rd cup of coffee while Agent Rodriguez reviewed security protocols with me, when my phone rang. The number was local but unfamiliar. "Mrs. Thorne, this is Janet Whitmore from Whitmore Estate Services. I handle liquidations for high-end properties. I believe I may have information relevant to your situation." Agent Rodriguez's head snapped up and she quickly activated a recording app on her tablet. "I'm sorry, I don't understand," I said carefully. "I've been following the news about art thefts in our area, and when I saw your husband's photograph this morning, I realized he's been one of my most valuable clients for the past 2 years. I think you should know what he's really been doing." The news photograph. Agent Rodriguez had warned me that the FBI's investigation was about to become public, but seeing it spelled out, my husband's face on the front page as a suspected art thief, made my stomach lurch. "What kind of client?" I managed to ask. "He's been purchasing items from estate sales under various names, always paying cash, always for pieces that seemed undervalued by the families selling them. I thought he was just a savvy collector, but now, Agent Rodriguez was frantically taking notes, gesturing for me to keep the woman talking. Can you be more specific about what he purchased? Paintings, sculptures, antique furniture, always pieces that the families didn't realize were valuable. He had an excellent eye for spotting authentic works that were being sold as reproductions or family heirlooms. I estimate he spent close to $2 million with me over the past 2 years. The room seemed to tilt around me. $2 million? Mrs. Thorne, where did your husband get that kind of cash? Because he never used credit cards or bank transfers. Always cash, in neat bundles like he was some kind of criminal. After Agent Rodriguez ended the call and contacted Janet Whitmore directly to arrange an official interview, she turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mrs. Thorne, your husband hasn't just been stealing art. He's been laundering money through legitimate purchases. Probably taking stolen pieces, selling them, then using the cash to buy undervalued authentic pieces from estate sales. It's brilliant, actually. Brilliant? The word came out sharper than I intended. From a criminal perspective, he's essentially been washing dirty money through the legitimate art market, building a collection of legally purchased pieces that he could then sell anywhere in the world without raising suspicion. I felt sick. So the pieces in the workshop, some are stolen, some are legitimately purchased? Exactly, which means some of that collection legally belongs to him, and, by extension, to you as his wife. The implications hit me like a freight train. Agent Rodriguez was saying that millions of dollars worth of art in that workshop might actually be mine. But before I could fully process this information, Dr. Ashford called. Vivian, I have news. I've been working with insurance companies to identify the stolen pieces from your photographs. So far, we've confirmed 16 stolen works with a combined value of $12 million. But there's something else. I put the call on speaker so Agent Rodriguez could hear. Several of the pieces you photographed aren't on any stolen art databases. They appear to be legitimate acquisitions. Very valuable legitimate acquisitions. How valuable? Agent Rodriguez asked. Conservatively, $8 to $10 million. And if they were purchased legally, they belong to the purchaser. Agent Rodriguez leaned back in her chair, running her hands through her hair. Mrs. Thorne, your husband may have inadvertently made you a very wealthy woman. That afternoon, while my children played video games in the safe house living room, trying to pretend this was all just an extended sleepover, Agent Rodriguez explained the legal complexities of my situation. The stolen pieces will be returned to their rightful owners, obviously, but the legitimately purchased works are a different matter. Even if Garrett used criminal proceeds to buy them, the sellers acted in good faith. Those transactions are likely valid. So I could actually keep some of the art? It's possible, but there's a complication. There was always a complication. Your husband's associates don't know which pieces are legitimately purchased and which are stolen. To them, you're sitting on millions of dollars worth of their stolen goods. They're not going to distinguish between what's legally yours and what belongs to them. That evening, as I helped Phoenix with his homework while trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown international number. Agent Rodriguez, who had been monitoring my phone, quickly signaled for me to answer and keep the caller talking. Hello, Mrs. Thorne. The voice was cultured, with a slight accent I couldn't place. I believe your husband has something that belongs to me. I'm sorry, who is this? A business associate of Garrett's. He's been unresponsive to my attempts to contact him. I'm hoping you might be more reasonable. Agent Rodriguez was frantically typing on her laptop, presumably trying to trace the call. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Mrs. Thorne, I'm not interested in playing games. Your husband has several pieces that my organization acquired for specific clients. We need those pieces returned immediately. Even if I knew what you were talking about, my husband left months ago. I have no way to contact him." There was a pause, then a chuckle that made my skin crawl. "Mrs. Thorne, I think you underestimate how resourceful we can be when it comes to motivating cooperation. You have 3 beautiful children." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Agent Rodriguez was already on her radio, calling for additional security. "Are you threatening my family?" I asked, anger overriding fear. "I'm simply pointing out that uncooperative behavior tends to have consequences. You have 24 hours to contact your husband and arrange for the return of our property. If you don't, we'll be forced to take more direct action." The line went dead. Agent Rodriguez immediately began making calls, but I found myself thinking about something entirely different. The man on the phone had assumed I was helpless, that I'd panic and somehow magically produce Garrett to solve his problem. He was wrong. Sitting in that anonymous safe house, surrounded by federal agents and fearing for my children's lives, I realized something had fundamentally shifted inside me. The scared, dependent wife who had discovered the workshop yesterday was gone. In her place was a woman who had just learned she might be worth millions of dollars and had access to information that could bring down an entire criminal organization. Garrett's associates wanted their stolen art back. The FBI wanted to arrest them. I wanted justice for what had been done to my family. And I was beginning to think there might be a way to give everyone exactly what they deserved. "Agent Rodriguez," I said, as she finished coordinating additional security measures, "I want to make a deal." She looked at me with surprise. "What kind of deal?" "I want to help you catch these people, all of them." "Mrs. Thorne, that could be extremely dangerous." I thought about my children sleeping in a strange house, about the years of lies Garrett had told, about the threat I'd just received. More dangerous than sitting here waiting for them to come after my family? I don't think so. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was taking control instead of merely reacting. And it felt good. Agent Rodriguez stared at me for a long moment before shaking her head. "Mrs. Thorne, I appreciate your willingness to help, but using civilians as bait is against FBI protocol. It's too dangerous." "More dangerous than letting these people hunt my family indefinitely?" I countered. "You said yourself they don't just let people walk away from operations like this." Before she could respond, Agent Chen burst through the front door, his usually calm demeanor replaced by urgent intensity. "Carmen, we have a problem. The surveillance team at the Thorne house just reported movement in the workshop. Someone's inside right now." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Garrett?" "Negative. 2 unknown subjects appears to be a professional search operation. They're being very systematic." He turned to Agent Rodriguez. "It gets worse. We just intercepted communications indicating they're planning to expand their search to include family members." The blood drained from my face. "They're going to come after us directly." "Not if we move first," Agent Rodriguez said grimly, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling for a tactical team to secure the workshop site." While the agents coordinated their response, I found myself thinking about the phone call from Garrett's associate. 24 hours to contact my husband and return their property. But what if I could give them something better than stolen art? What if I could give them Garrett himself? "Agent Rodriguez," I interrupted her call. "What if we don't have to use me as bait? What if we can draw them out another way?" She covered her phone. "What do you mean?" "They want their stolen pieces back, right? And they think I can contact Garrett. What if I tell them I've located him and arrange a meeting?" Agent Chen frowned. "But you don't know where he is." "No, but they don't know that." "If I can convince them that Garrett's agreed to return their property in exchange for leaving my family alone, they might show up for the exchange." Agent Rodriguez finished her call and considered my proposal. "Even if that worked, which is a big if, we'd still need actual stolen art to make the exchange believable. We have the workshop full of pieces, most of which need to be returned to their rightful owners." I felt a surge of frustration. "So we let these criminals terrorize my family because we're worried about chain of custody?" "Vivian," Agent Chen said gently, "I understand your anger, but—" "Do you?" I snapped. "Do you really? Because this morning, my biggest worry was making mortgage payments. Now I'm hiding in a safe house with my children, while art thieves threaten to kill us over crimes my husband committed without my knowledge. So forgive me if I'm not concerned about following every protocol to the letter. The room fell silent. Through the window, I could see River and Phoenix playing catch in the small backyard, blissfully unaware that their lives had been turned upside down by their father's criminal activities. Agent Rodriguez's phone rang, breaking the tension. Her expression grew increasingly grim as she listened. Understood, yes, immediately. She hung up and turned to us. The tactical team found the workshop empty, but whoever was there took several high-value pieces. They also left something behind. What? A message, spray-painted on the wall. We know where you are. My legs felt weak. They know about the safe house? We don't think so, but we can't take that chance. We're moving you to a secondary location within the hour. As if the universe was determined to pile crisis upon crisis, my phone rang. Dr. Ashford's name appeared on the screen. Vivian, thank God I reached you. I have critical information about your husband's operation. I put the call on speaker, watching both agents lean forward intently. I've been working with international colleagues to trace the provenance of some pieces from your photographs. What we've discovered is extensive. How extensive? Agent Rodriguez asked. This operation spans at least 6 countries and involves some of the most sophisticated art thieves in the world. Your husband wasn't just a thief, Vivian. He was a coordinator, managing stolen pieces through a network that includes galleries, auction houses, and private collectors. The scope of it was staggering. How long has this been going on? Based on what we've uncovered, at least 8 years, possibly longer. 8 years. River would have been 2 years old when this started. Phoenix wasn't even born yet. Garrett had been building a criminal empire while I was changing diapers and planning birthday parties. There's more, Dr. Ashford continued. Several of the legitimate purchases your husband made, the ones that might legally belong to you, are incredibly significant. I've identified a Degas sketch worth at least $3 million and a Ming Dynasty vase that could be worth $5 million. Agent Chen whistled softly. Mrs. Thorne, if those pieces were purchased legally, I could be worth $8 million, I finished, the number so large it felt meaningless. But there's a complication, Dr. Ashford added. Some of those legitimate purchases may not be legitimate after all. I found evidence that several estate sales your husband bought from had pieces that were actually stolen from other collections years earlier. The families selling them had no idea they were dealing in stolen goods. Agent Rodriguez rubbed her temples. So even the supposedly legal pieces could be evidence in other theft cases. Exactly. This investigation could take years to fully unravel. After Dr. Ashford hung up, I found myself laughing. Not from humor, but from the sheer absurdity of my situation. So let me understand this correctly. My husband abandoned me and our children to run off with his pregnant mistress, leaving behind evidence of an international art theft operation. I may or may not be worth millions of dollars, depending on legal proceedings that could last for years. And in the meantime, dangerous criminals are hunting my family because they think we have their stolen property. That's an accurate summary, Agent Chen said carefully. And your solution is to hide us in safe houses indefinitely while you try to build cases against people who clearly have no problem threatening children. Agent Rodriguez's expression softened. Vivian, I know this is frustrating. It's not frustrating, I interrupted. It's unacceptable. My children didn't ask for any of this. They deserve to have their lives back. I walked to the window, watching my boys play in the yard. Hazel sat on the porch steps, sketching in her notebook, trying to process this upheaval through art, the same way I'd always processed difficult emotions through organizing and planning. That's when the idea crystallized. Agent Rodriguez, what if I told you I think I know how to contact Garrett? Both agents stared at me. What do you mean? Delphine is pregnant, right? And they're planning to start a new life in Costa Rica. But pregnant women need medical care, especially for international travel. They can't just disappear completely, not if they want to protect the baby. Agent Chen was already pulling out his tablet. You think he'll surface for prenatal appointments? I think he's too controlling and paranoid to trust just any doctor in a foreign country. I think he'll want American doctors, at least for the major appointments. Agent Rodriguez was nodding slowly. If we can identify the medical providers, we can track them down, I finished. And once we find Garrett, we can use him to draw out his associates. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like we had a real plan. More importantly, I felt like I was contributing to the solution instead of just being a victim who needed protection. There's just one problem, Agent Rodriguez said. Even if we locate your husband, getting him to cooperate will be nearly impossible. He's facing decades in federal prison. I smiled grimly. Agent Rodriguez, you clearly don't understand how well I know my husband. Garrett's weakness has always been his ego. He can't resist the opportunity to prove he's smarter than everyone else. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we give him exactly what he wants. A chance to outsmart the FBI and protect his new family. And in doing so, he'll hand us everything we need to destroy his entire operation. The plan forming in my mind was risky, complex, and would require perfect timing. But as I watched my children playing in the yard of a safe house, displaced from their home by crimes they didn't commit, I knew I was ready to take any risk necessary to get their lives back. Garrett thought he'd left behind a helpless wife who would quietly disappear with his secrets. He was about to learn just how wrong he could be. The plan we developed over the next 48 hours was audacious in its simplicity. Agent Rodriguez had initially resisted involving me directly, but as we worked through the logistics, it became clear that my intimate knowledge of Garrett's psychology was essential to making it work. Dr. Marcus Webb, a federal forensic psychologist who specialized in white-collar criminals, arrived at the safe house on our second day to help refine the approach. A soft-spoken man in his 50s with graying temples and thoughtful eyes, he spent hours interviewing me about Garrett's personality traits, decision-making patterns, and emotional triggers. Your husband exhibits classic narcissistic traits, Dr. Webb concluded after our third session. The elaborate double life, the sense of superiority over his victims, the belief that rules don't apply to him. But narcissists have a fatal flaw. They can't resist opportunities to demonstrate their intellectual superiority. Which means what, practically speaking? Agent Chen asked. It means if we present him with a scenario where he believes he can outsmart federal law enforcement while protecting his new family, his ego won't let him refuse the challenge. While the psychological profile was being developed, Agent Rodriguez's team had been working the medical angle. It took 36 hours, but they finally located Dr. Patricia Sandoval, an obstetrician in Miami who specialized in high-risk pregnancies for international patients. Delphine Carver is scheduled for an appointment next Tuesday, Agent Rodriguez informed us during our morning briefing. Advanced ultrasound and genetic testing. The appointment was made 3 weeks ago using a credit card registered to a shell company we've connected to your husband's operation. I felt a mix of vindication and revulsion. Even in his new life, Garrett couldn't resist using criminal proceeds for personal expenses. More importantly, Agent Chen added, the appointment is scheduled for 2 p.m., and they've requested a private consultation room, perfect for our purposes. The plan was elegant in its deception. I would call the number that had threatened me, claiming that I'd finally contacted Garrett and convinced him to negotiate. He was willing to return the stolen pieces in exchange for a guarantee that his new family would be left alone. The meeting would be set for Tuesday afternoon at a warehouse in Fort Lauderdale, exactly when Garrett would actually be 30 miles away at a doctor's appointment. When Garrett's associates arrived for the fake exchange, they'd find FBI agents instead of stolen art. Simultaneously, Garrett would be arrested at the medical office. Faced with federal charges and the knowledge that his criminal partners had been captured, He'd hopefully be motivated to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence and protection for Delphine and their unborn child. The key, Dr. Webb emphasized, is making Garrett believe that cooperation is his idea, not ours. He needs to feel like he's orchestrating a brilliant solution that protects his new family, while screwing over partners who were planning to betray him anyway. That's where my role became crucial. I would be the one to approach Garrett after his arrest, not as a vengeful ex-wife, but as someone offering him a way to salvage something from the wreckage of his criminal empire. Sunday evening, I made the call to Garrett's associate from a secure FBI line that would appear to originate from a burner phone. "I was expecting to hear from you sooner," the cultured voice said when he answered. "It took time to locate my husband," I replied, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "He's been difficult to convince." "And now?" "He's agreed to return your property, but he has conditions." There was a pause. "What kind of conditions?" "He wants guarantees that his new family will be left alone, completely alone, forever." "That can be arranged, assuming the merchandise is returned in good condition." "It is, but he wants to handle the exchange personally, Tuesday afternoon, 2 p.m., at the Meridian Warehouse Complex in Fort Lauderdale, Building C, Bay 7. Another pause, longer this time. "Mrs. Thorne, if this is some kind of trap..." "What possible trap could I set? I'm a suburban housewife hiding in witness protection. I just want my children to be safe." "Very well, Tuesday at 2 p.m., and Mrs. Thorne, if your husband isn't there with our property, the consequences will be severe." After I hung up, Agent Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Well done. You sounded genuinely nervous." "I was genuinely nervous," I admitted. "What if this doesn't work?" "Then we adapt," she said simply. "But I think it will work. The psychology is sound, and we'll have every angle covered." Monday passed in a blur of final preparations. The children were moved to yet another safe house with a full protection detail, though I told them it was just an extra precaution, while Mommy helped the police with some paperwork. Hazel was too perceptive to fully believe the explanation, but she helped keep her brothers distracted. Tuesday morning arrived gray and humid, typical Florida weather that matched my mood. At 10 a.m., I was fitted with a concealed recording device and given a final briefing on my role in Garrett's interrogation. "Remember," Dr. Webb coached, "you're not there for revenge or closure. You're there to present him with a logical solution to his problems. He needs to believe that cooperating with us serves his own interests. What if he refuses to see me?" "He won't," the psychologist said confidently. "His narcissism won't let him pass up the opportunity to gloat about his new life and superior intelligence." At 1:45 p.m., I sat in an unmarked van outside Dr. Sandoval's medical complex, watching through tinted windows as Agent Chen's team took positions around the building. My palms were sweating despite the air conditioning. "Target vehicles approaching," Agent Rodriguez's voice crackled through my earpiece. "Black BMW sedan, license plate matches our surveillance data." Through the van's periscope camera, I watched Garrett emerge from the driver's side. Even from a distance, I could see he looked different, thinner, more nervous than the confident man who'd walked out of our lives. Delphine appeared next, her pregnancy clearly visible now, one hand protectively covering her rounded belly. The sight of them together should have hurt more than it did. Instead, I felt a strange detachment, as if I was watching actors in a play rather than the man I'd once planned to grow old with. "They're entering the building," Agent Chen reported. "Medical team confirms appointment check-in." 20 minutes later, Agent Rodriguez's team moved in. The arrest was swift and professional. Garrett was taken into custody in the medical office parking garage, away from other patients and Delphine, who was temporarily detained for questioning but not arrested. "Phase 1 complete," Agent Rodriguez's voice announced. "Warehouse team reports targets arriving on schedule." I closed my eyes, knowing that 30 miles away, Garrett's criminal associates were walking into an FBI trap. By the time they realized there was no exchange meeting, they'd be surrounded. "Mrs. Thorne, Agent Chen said gently. Are you ready for phase 2? I opened my eyes and nodded. It was time to face my husband for the first time since he'd walked out on our family. Time to convince him that his best option, his only option, was complete cooperation with the investigation that would bring down his entire criminal network. As we drove toward the federal detention facility where Garrett was being held, I rehearsed the approach Dr. Webb had coached me on. I wasn't going in as his abandoned wife seeking justice. I was going in as the mother of his children, offering him a chance to protect his new family while salvaging something from the wreckage of his choices. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was about to save the man who'd tried to destroy my life. But sometimes, the best revenge is success. And I was finally ready to succeed on my own terms. The federal detention facility looked exactly like what it was, a fortress of concrete and steel designed to contain people who had made enemies of the United States government. As Agent Chen escorted me through multiple security checkpoints, each more intimidating than the last, I found myself thinking about how dramatically the power dynamic had shifted since Garrett's threatening text just days ago. The interview room was sterile and windowless, furnished with nothing but a metal table and 4 chairs bolted to the floor. I sat across from where Garrett would sit, Agent Rodriguez positioned behind me where he could see her but I couldn't, maintaining the illusion that this was my initiative rather than an FBI operation. When the door opened and Garrett shuffled in wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackles, I barely recognized him. The confident architect who had once commanded respect in boardrooms and dominated our household had been replaced by a haggard man whose hands shook slightly as he sat down. "Hello, Garrett," I said quietly, keeping my voice neutral despite the surge of conflicting emotions seeing him triggered. He stared at me for a long moment before speaking. "They said you wanted to see me. I have to admit, I'm surprised." His voice carried the same patronizing tone I remembered, but it lacked its former conviction. "I'm sure you are, but we need to talk about our children's future." "Our children?" He laughed bitterly. "Vivian, I made my position clear when I left. I'm starting a new family now, a planned family." The casual dismissal of Hazel, River, and Phoenix made my jaw clench, but I forced myself to remain calm. Dr. Webb had warned me that Garrett would try to provoke an emotional reaction to regain some sense of control. "I'm aware of your new situation," I said evenly. "Congratulations on the pregnancy, by the way. How is Delphine handling federal detention?" For the first time, cracks appeared in his facade. "She's not under arrest. She's innocent in all this." "Is she? Because the FBI seems to think otherwise. Something about money laundering through art purchases, using criminal proceeds to fund prenatal care, conspiracy charges." "Delphine doesn't know anything about my business operations," Garrett snapped. "She's just guilty of falling in love with the wrong man." I leaned forward slightly. "Then we want the same thing, protecting an innocent woman and her unborn child from the consequences of your choices." He studied my face suspiciously. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that your former business associates are now in federal custody, arrested while trying to recover their stolen property. I'm talking about the fact that the FBI has enough evidence to prosecute you for art theft, money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy charges that could put you away for life." Garrett's face went pale. What did you do?" "I cooperated with federal investigators to protect my children from the criminals who were threatening them because of your activities." I kept my voice steady, matter of fact. "The same criminals who are now facing decades in prison and probably wondering if they should blame you for their current predicament." "You have no idea what you've done," he whispered. "These people don't forgive. They don't forget. Even from prison they can reach." "Not if they're too busy dealing with their own legal problems," I interrupted. "And not if you provide testimony that helps put them away permanently." Agent Rodriguez had coached me on this moment, the pivot where I stopped delivering bad news and started offering solutions. "Garrett, you're looking at multiple life sentences unless you cooperate. But But cooperation could mean the difference between dying in federal prison and actually having a chance to be a father to your new child. He stared at me, calculating. What kind of cooperation? Complete cooperation, names, financial records, detailed information about every theft, every forgery, every transaction. Everything the FBI needs to dismantle the entire operation. And in exchange? Witness protection for you and Delphine, reduced sentences. A chance for your child to grow up with a father, even if that father is a convicted felon. Garrett leaned back in his chair, his expression cycling through anger, fear, and what might have been relief. Why would you help me, after everything I've done? This was the crucial moment Dr. Webb had prepared me for, the question that would determine whether Garrett accepted the deal or tried to fight the charges. Because despite everything you've done to me, to our children, I'm not vindictive enough to want your new baby to grow up without a father. I paused, letting that sink in. And because I've learned that the best way to protect my family is to make sure your former associates are locked away permanently. What about the art, the legitimate pieces I purchased? I allowed myself a small smile. That's being sorted out through the courts. Some pieces will be returned to their rightful owners. Others? I shrugged. Let's just say that your abandoned wife may not be as financially helpless as you assumed. His eyes widened as the implication hit him. You're keeping the legally purchased pieces. The ones that were actually legally purchased, yes. It turns out that abandoning your family doesn't automatically transfer property rights to your new girlfriend. For the first time since he'd entered the room, Garrett looked genuinely shocked. How much are we talking about? Enough to ensure that our children's college educations are fully funded. Enough to pay off the house you left us struggling to keep. Enough to start over completely. Agent Rodriguez had warned me not to reveal specific dollar amounts. The ongoing investigation made exact valuations impossible. But seeing Garrett's expression as he realized the magnitude of what he'd walked away from was deeply satisfying. You can't just take my collection, he protested weakly. I'm not taking anything. I'm keeping what legally belongs to me as your spouse. The same way you kept everything in our joint accounts when you abandoned us. The parallel hit home, and I could see him struggling with the realization that his own tactics were being used against him. There's something else you should know, I continued. The FBI found evidence that some of your associates were planning to eliminate loose ends once the heat got too intense, family members included. Garrett's face went ashen. That's impossible. They wouldn't. They spray-painted a threat on our workshop wall, Garrett. They made direct threats against our children. Your former partners were planning to solve their problems by making sure no one was left alive to testify. I watched him process this information, seeing the moment when he realized that his new family was in just as much danger as his old one. So here's the reality, I said, leaning forward. You can cooperate fully with the FBI, help them build cases that will keep these people locked up forever, and have a chance at a reduced sentence in minimum security where you might actually survive to meet your new child. Or you can try to fight the charges, probably lose, definitely serve life sentences in maximum security, and spend every day wondering if today is the day your former partners decide to send a message about the consequences of betrayal. Garrett stared at the table for a long moment. When he looked up, the arrogant man who had walked out on our family was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood that he was completely out of options. If I cooperate, he said quietly, what happens to Delphine and the baby? Witness protection, new identities, a chance to start over somewhere safe. And our children? Hazel, River, Phoenix? For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd once thought I'd married. They'll be safe. The people threatening them will be in prison, and their financial future will be secure. He nodded slowly. I want to speak to my lawyer about the terms. Of course. But Garrett? I stood up, preparing to leave. Don't take too long to decide. The FBI's offer won't stay on the table forever. and your former partners are probably already working on legal strategies that involve blaming everything on you. As Agent Rodriguez escorted me out of the detention facility, I felt a strange sense of closure. Not the dramatic confrontation I'd sometimes imagined, but something better. The satisfaction of knowing that I'd played a crucial role in ensuring justice would be served. Garrett would cooperate. His ego wouldn't let him accept being the fall guy for his partner's crimes, and his fear for Delphine and their baby would override any remaining loyalty to his criminal associates. The man who had emptied our accounts and abandoned our family was about to hand law enforcement everything they needed to dismantle an international art theft operation. And I would finally be free to build the life my children deserved. The first guests arrived at our Millbrook estate precisely at 8 o'clock, their luxury vehicles winding up the circular driveway toward the Georgian mansion that had been my grandmother's wedding gift to us 8 years earlier. From the grand foyer, I watched Mayor Thompson and his wife emerge from their black Mercedes, followed closely by Patricia Carlisle in her signature silver Bentley. Each arrival represented another witness to what would unfold over the next 4 hours. The ballroom had been transformed into a winter wonderland of crystal and silver, with towering floral arrangements that had cost more than most people's monthly salaries. A jazz quartet played sophisticated standards from a small stage near the French doors that led to our snow-dusted gardens. Everything was perfect, elegant, and completely normal, the ideal backdrop for the systematic destruction of my husband's world. Damien moved through the crowd with his usual confident charm, accepting congratulations on another successful year for Hamilton and Associates, completely unaware that he was presiding over his own professional funeral. He wore the navy blue Tom Ford tuxedo I had given him for our 5th anniversary, and he looked every inch the successful architect and businessman that our guests believed him to be. Cassandra had arrived fashionably late at 9:15, stunning in a red silk gown that I recognized from the Nordstrom receipt I'd found among our corporate expenses. She moved through the party with practiced ease, chatting with clients and municipal officials as if she were already a senior partner rather than an executive assistant conducting an affair with her married boss. The audacity of her performance was almost admirable. "Victoria, darling, what a spectacular evening," Patricia Carlisle said as she approached me near the champagne station. "You and Damien have outdone yourselves once again. The whole county will be talking about this party for months." "Thank you, Patricia. I hope it will indeed be memorable." I smiled, knowing that my words carried a meaning she couldn't possibly understand yet. As the evening progressed, I found myself moving through familiar social rhythms with a strange sense of detachment. Conversations about upcoming projects that would soon be under different management. Toasts to partnerships that would be dissolved within hours. Compliments on our beautiful home that would soon be solely mine again. At 11:30, I excused myself from a conversation with County Commissioner Wild and made my way to Damien's study, where Harrison Whitmore was waiting with a small team of legal assistants. They had entered through the service entrance an hour earlier, and everything was prepared for the midnight transition of power. "Are you ready, Victoria?" Harrison asked, his expression grave but determined. I nodded, feeling surprisingly calm despite the magnitude of what we were about to execute. "All the documentation is complete?" "Everything. The evidence of financial malfeasance, the breach of fiduciary duty findings, the emergency corporate resolutions. It's all been prepared according to the legal framework we established. At 12:01 a.m., you'll have complete operational control of Hamilton and Associates, and Mr. Hamilton will be legally prohibited from making any business decisions without your written authorization." The timing was crucial. While our guests celebrated the arrival of the new year, I would be signing documents that would strip Damien of everything he thought he controlled. By the time the champagne finished bubbling, he would be nothing more than an employee in the company he believed he owned. At 11:55, I returned to the ballroom and moved to the small stage where the jazz quartet had been playing. The microphone felt surprisingly light in my hand as I tapped it gently, drawing the attention of our 200 guests. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just a moment. The conversations gradually quieted as all eyes turned toward me. As we prepare to welcome the new year, Damien and I wanted to take a moment to reflect on everything we've accomplished together and to share some exciting news about the future of Hamilton and Associates. Damien looked up from his conversation with Martin Rivers, clearly surprised that I was making an announcement he hadn't prepared. But he smiled and began moving toward the stage, probably assuming I was about to introduce some brief remarks from him. This past year has been one of tremendous growth and success for our firm, I continued, my voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. We've completed projects worth over $100 million, expanded our client base, and strengthened our position as the premier architectural firm in the region. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Patricia Carlisle beamed approvingly, clearly expecting standard corporate celebration rhetoric. But as we look toward the future, it's important to acknowledge that success requires constant evolution and sometimes difficult decisions. I paused, watching Damien's expression shift from confidence to confusion, as he realized this wasn't the speech he had expected. Which is why I'm pleased to announce that beginning January 1st, Hamilton and Associates will be operating under new management structure. After careful consideration and legal review, the board has determined that the company requires fresh leadership to achieve its full potential. The murmur that went through the crowd was louder now, more uncertain. Several guests glanced toward Damien, who had stopped moving toward the stage and was staring at me with dawning alarm. Effective at midnight tonight, I will be assuming the role of Chief Executive Officer and Managing Principal of Hamilton and Associates, with full operational authority over all business decisions, client relationships, and personnel matters. The silence that followed was deafening. 200 of the region's most influential people stood frozen, trying to process what they had just heard. Damien's face had gone completely white, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. This transition reflects the company's need to align operational control with actual ownership and financial responsibility, I continued, my voice never wavering. As the primary investor and majority stakeholder in Hamilton and Associates, I believe this change will better serve our clients and ensure the continued success of our firm. Mayor Thompson was the first to break the stunned silence, beginning to applaud slowly. Patricia Carlisle joined him, followed by others who were sophisticated enough to recognize a corporate coup when they witnessed one. Within moments, the entire ballroom was applauding. What they now understood was my declaration of independence. But I wasn't finished. I should also mention that as part of this reorganization, we'll be implementing new policies regarding the use of corporate resources and the appropriate boundaries between personal and professional relationships. Effective immediately, any employee found to have violated these standards will face termination. Cassandra, who had been standing near the bar, went visibly pale as the implications became clear. Several guests followed my gaze toward her, and I watched her realize that her affair with Damien hadn't been as secret as they had believed. Now, I said, raising my champagne flute, let's toast to new beginnings, honest partnerships, and the kind of success that comes from building on solid foundations rather than shifting sand. The countdown to midnight began as I descended from the stage, champagne glass still raised. 10, 9, 8. Damien finally broke from his paralysis and began pushing through the crowd toward me. 7, 6, 5. Cassandra was already moving toward the exit, clearly understanding that her employment had just been terminated in the most public way possible. 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year, the crowd shouted in unison as confetti fell from the ceiling and the jazz quartet launched into Auld Lang Syne. At exactly 12:01 a.m., as our guests embraced and celebrated around us, Harrison appeared at my elbow, with a leather portfolio containing the documents that would formalize everything I had just announced. I signed each page methodically while chaos swirled around me, legally cementing my complete control over the business empire that had always been mine. Damien finally reached me as I was signing the last document, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. "Victoria, what the hell do you think you're doing? You can't just—" I can and I have, I interrupted calmly, handing the completed paperwork back to Harrison. As of 60 seconds ago, you are no longer authorized to make any decisions regarding Hamilton and Associates. Your access to corporate accounts has been suspended, your management authority has been revoked, and your employment status is under review, pending a full investigation of your misuse of company resources. This is insane, he hissed, leaning closer so our conversation wouldn't be overheard by the celebrating guests. You're destroying everything we built together. No, Damien, I'm reclaiming everything I built and you tried to steal. I smiled. The same gracious smile I had worn throughout 8 years of marriage. But now it carried an entirely different meaning. You should probably call an attorney. And you might want to start looking for new accommodations, since the house is in my name as well. As Damien stood there, speechless for perhaps the first time in our relationship, I turned back to our guests, who were still celebrating what they now understood was my complete victory. Patricia Carlyle approached with her husband, both of them wearing expressions of profound respect. Victoria, Patricia said quietly, that was the most impressive display of strategic planning I've witnessed in 30 years of business. Your grandmother would be very proud. She was right. Eleanor Whitmore had always taught me that true power wasn't about making noise or throwing tantrums. It was about controlling the foundation and being patient enough to wait for the perfect moment to assert that control. As the last guests departed in the early hours of January 1st, I stood alone in the ballroom that had served as the stage for my liberation. Damien had left with Cassandra around 1:30, both of them understanding that their presence was no longer welcome in my home or my company. The caterers were cleaning up the remnants of what had been a perfect party, and soon the house would be quiet again. But the silence would be different now. For the first time in 8 years, it would be the silence of complete autonomy, of absolute control over my own life and business. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more gradual erosion of my authority and self-worth. I had celebrated the new year by claiming everything that was rightfully mine, and tomorrow I would begin building something even better on the foundation I had finally learned to protect. The game was over, and I had won everything. 2 months later, I stood in the grand foyer of Whitmore Estate Auctions, watching potential buyers examine a carefully curated selection of artwork that had once filled Garrett's hidden workshop. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now legitimately selling art in the same building where my husband had purchased pieces with criminal proceeds years earlier. The bidding for Lot 17, the Degas preparatory sketch, will begin at $2 million, the auctioneer announced from the podium. I watched from the back of the room as paddles rose around the elegant auction hall, driving the price higher with each bid. Janet Whitmore stood beside me, her expression one of professional satisfaction mixed with personal vindication. I have to admit, Mrs. Thorne, when you first approached me about consigning these pieces, I was skeptical. But your authentication documentation is flawless. The documentation had been crucial. After months of legal proceedings, forensic analysis, and investigation by international art experts, 7 pieces from Garrett's collection had been definitively proven to be legitimately purchased with legally obtained funds. The Degas sketch, the Ming Dynasty vase, a small Monet oil study, and 4 other significant works were legally mine to dispose of as I saw fit. Lot 17 sells for $4.2 million. The auctioneer announced, bringing scattered applause from the audience. I felt a quiet thrill of satisfaction, not just at the astronomical price, but at what it represented. Each sale was another step toward complete independence, another nail in the coffin of my dependence on anyone else for my family's security. My phone buzzed with a text from Tracy, who was watching the children while I attended the auction. River wants to know if you're buying a castle with all your art money. I told him castles don't have good Wi-Fi. Hazel rolled her eyes. Phoenix is building a fort out of couch cushions and declaring himself king of the living room. The normalcy of the message made me smile. After months of safe houses, federal protection, and legal proceedings, My children were finally able to just be children again. We'd moved into a beautiful colonial home in Millbrook Heights, not far from our old neighborhood, but in a gated community with excellent security. The children had adjusted to their new school with surprising resilience, and Phoenix had even made friends with a boy next door who shared his passion for elaborate backyard construction projects. The final lot of the evening, the Ming Dynasty ceremonial vase, is estimated to sell for between $3 and $5 million, the auctioneer continued. Dr. Ashford appeared at my elbow, having flown in from Boston specifically for tonight's auction. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she said quietly. "Not just of the financial outcome, but of how you've handled this entire situation." The investigation had concluded 3 weeks ago with a series of guilty pleas and lengthy sentences. Garrett's cooperation had been as complete as promised, providing federal prosecutors with enough evidence to dismantle what they called the most sophisticated art theft operation in U.S. history. His former associates, including the man who had threatened my family, received sentences ranging from 20 to 40 years. Garrett himself had been sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole in 8. Delphine had received 3 years probation after cooperating with authorities and demonstrating that her involvement had been minimal. They were both in witness protection now, somewhere in the American Midwest, raising their daughter under new identities. I felt nothing but relief when I thought about them. The anger and betrayal had faded, replaced by gratitude that their cooperation had ensured my children's safety and a genuine hope that their daughter would grow up without the shadow of her father's crimes. Lot 19 sells for $5.7 million, the auctioneer announced. The auction house erupted in sustained applause. Janet Whitmore was beaming as she calculated her commission, but I was thinking about more practical matters. The proceeds from tonight's auction, combined with the insurance settlements and the legitimate assets I had retained, would total just over $15 million. $15 million that Garrett had unknowingly provided through his criminal enterprise, money that would now fund college educations, charitable giving, and a level of financial security my children would never have to worry about losing. But more importantly, it represented something that couldn't be quantified in dollars. Proof that I was capable of protecting my family, of making complex decisions under pressure, of rebuilding from complete devastation. As the auction concluded and buyers began collecting their purchases, Agent Rodriguez approached me with a warm smile. She'd become more than just a federal agent over the past months. She'd become a friend, someone who understood what it meant to fight for justice in a world that didn't always reward good intentions. "How does it feel?" she asked, gesturing toward the auction hall where millions of dollars had just changed hands. "Surreal," I admitted. 6 months ago, I was facing foreclosure and wondering how to pay for groceries. Tonight, I just watched strangers bid millions of dollars for art that was hidden in my backyard. "Any regrets about not keeping some of the pieces?" I shook my head. The art was never really mine. It was part of Garrett's world, part of a life built on lies and crime. I'd rather have the money and know it came from legitimate sales to people who will properly appreciate what they've purchased. As we walked toward the exit, Dr. Ashford fell into step beside us. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you, Vivian. Have you given any thought to what comes next? Beyond the immediate security concerns, I mean." The question had been weighing on me for weeks. Financial security was wonderful, but it wasn't a life plan. My children needed more than just a wealthy mother. They needed a mother with purpose, with goals that extended beyond protecting them from their father's legacy. "Actually, I have," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I'm thinking about starting a foundation, something that helps families who've been victimized by financial crimes. People who find themselves in situations like mine, betrayed by someone they trusted, facing legal complexities they don't understand, needing protection from criminals they never knew existed." Agent Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "There's definitely a need for that kind of support. The system isn't designed for civilians who get caught up in federal investigations through no fault of their own." Exactly. I learned so much about navigating these situations, about working with law enforcement, about protecting assets and children simultaneously. Maybe that knowledge could help other people who find themselves in similar circumstances. As we reached the parking garage, I realized that the foundation idea wasn't just about helping others. It was about transforming my experience from something that happened to me into something I could use to help others. It was about taking control of the narrative, ensuring that Garrett's betrayal became the catalyst for something positive, rather than just a traumatic chapter in my family's history. My phone rang as I reached my car. Hazel's name appeared on the screen. "Mom, when are you coming home? River and Phoenix fell asleep during movie night, and I want to hear about the auction before I go to bed." "On my way now, sweetheart. And yes, we can definitely afford that art camp you wanted to attend this summer." I could hear her smile through the phone. "Cool. Drive safe, okay? We love you." As I drove through the quiet streets toward home, toward my children who were safe and secure and sleeping peacefully in beds they would never have to worry about losing, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed. Garrett had emptied our accounts thinking he was taking everything that mattered. What he'd actually done was force me to discover resources I never knew I possessed. Not just financial resources, but personal ones. Strength, intelligence, the ability to make complex decisions under pressure, and most importantly, the capacity to protect my family no matter what threats we faced. The workshop that I'd entered as a desperate wife looking to sell furniture had become the foundation of a new life built on my own terms. The secret Garrett never knew wasn't just about my grandmother's expertise or the value of his stolen art. The secret was that I was far stronger than either of us had ever realized. And unlike his criminal fortune, this was wealth that could never be stolen, emptied, or taken away. Coming up next, you'll see 2 more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're gonna love what's next. Tap to keep the journey going.